let's talk about what we mean with flows. Flows are for us multi-step interactive forms used right now by customers like Rocket Mortgage, Jubble, Century 21, BCG Digital Ventures, and eXp Realty. And they use flows to get more and better quality leads. So today we will also look at a few examples so you can see why flows are easier to fill out, just look more appealing, and are less overwhelming than standard forms. Here on the right side, by the way, you see an example from our friends at HelpCheck. So this is exactly how a flow can look like. What makes flows particularly interesting are the various use cases they can be applied to, and also the different industries that can make use of flows. Let me just have a look at the poll to see. Yeah, as I see, yeah, wow, we have for almost every industry someone represented here, so that's super nice. And I think this just shows that, yeah, there are many, many use cases for our flows. It doesn't matter if you are into traditional lead generations for B2C or B2B, or maybe you want to make appointment booking just easier, or you want to gather customer feedback. All of this is possible with flows, or even for webinar registrations, right? All of you had to go through a flow to be sitting here today. And thanks to those individual steps that you break a flow into and the possibilities to design a flow, we can see an increase of conversions of an average from 42% within the first 3 months. So it really is making sense to to use flows for our customers. And of course, we will show you exactly today what a good flow is. For this, we have divided our tips and tricks into 5 categories, which we have identified as best practices over the last years. So let's start with the length of the flow. I mean, we all know that filling out thousands of questions, which take ages, is something we don't enjoy, and most likely we won't stick until the end to do that. So from our experience, it makes sense to have like 3 to 5 questions, just to not tire out the user, and then ask for the contact information, right? So of course, it also always depends on the type of question you are asking, which already brings me to the category number 2. So the less effort required from the user, the better. Questions where they have to type in lengthy answers are never really well received. I mean, of course, there are always exceptions to the rule. So there might be use cases like, for example, in recruiting, where you need to ask the candidate for more input from their experience, or you have a specific questions that they have to just type in. This might be something else. But in general, when it comes to lead generation, it's it's better to have like easy question types. And the easiest one is a multiple choice. Multiple choice questions are great. You just give like 4 to 5 answer options. That should be the maximum to not overwhelm the user, and they can just choose their answer with one click. And to increase engagement, you can also use different elements. For example, a loader or a picture choice block are always nice to make your flow more interesting. And please don't worry if you have no idea what I'm talking about right now. Jenna is definitely going to show you exactly those 2 things later in the live demo. So furthermore, we have the length now, we have like the type of questions, but how should you get started with a flow? It's really good to start as easy as possible, meaning you can start, for example, with a simple yes or no question. Do you have a website? What pet do you want to insure? Is it a cat or a dog? You know, there are really different things which you can start your flow with, but you should always keep in mind that it should be as easy as possible. So you shouldn't start with asking for contact details, simply because contact details are a huge, huge step, and you want to guide your user through your flow. So meaning you want to build trust. You want to make sure that they feel assured that they are in the right place right now, to fill out the flow, basically. So keep in mind that the contact details are something best to keep at the end. So you should then never finish with just the contract form and let your user hanging. Obviously, it's always nice to show your gratitude, thank them for the time, um, inform them about the next steps. For example, maybe there's some to do on their side. Maybe they should confirm their email, or they will receive more information from you via email, or maybe you want to call them back in the next hour. Let them know what's going to happen. And then in category 4, we talk about the design. It's super important that you implement your corporate identity into your flow, right? So you should always have your logo. You should use the colors and the fonts which your users already know, because maybe you have already nice brand awareness created in your industry. So it's important to show that also in your flow so that users can trust you and know, hey, this is the company I know, so I can definitely fill out this flow. It's all right. And with Heyflow, it's all possible to do that. And our last category talks about small features that can really make the difference. So you can use variables, for example, to address your user by name, or use conditional logic to tailor the flow experience even more to the responses. And all of this we will show you, of course, in the live demo. But first, let's have a look at the general structure of a good flow, which you also can follow for your own flows. And we start with the value proposition. So your flow is always part of something bigger. What I mean with that is that your flow is not just floating in the internet without any context. So either your flow is part of a landing page, or maybe you have ads and you direct to your flow. Maybe you want to send out an email to gather customer feedback. So your value proposition and your context is in this email, right? So you also want to make sure that your user knows what they have to do in your flow, what is expected of them to do. And this is always coming from the value proposition. And this can have many different forms. Today, we won't go into details of how this can look like because it would be just beyond the scope. So we will start our flow really with the warm-up question. So exactly what I said in the beginning, you should start as easy as possible. Something they can answer straight away without having to think about it, without having to ask someone else. So something they know definitely when you ask them this. And then you go on to like 2 to 3 pre-qualification questions, which makes sense for your use case, right? You know best how to pre-qualify your leads, because of course you want to have more leads with your flow, but you also want to have a high quality from those leads. So you can already, with those pre-qualification questions, you can already sort out the ones who are not really fitting to your product or your services. And this is something, you know best how to pre-qualify your leads with this. And then, I mean, we have like 3 to 4 questions. That's perfect. So you then can go into and ask for the contact details. And here it's really important to only ask for the most relevant questions. Maybe you need the name and the email address. That's great. If you need the phone number, of course, add it in. If you don't need the phone number, for example, make sure to mark it as optional, or maybe just leave it out completely. The fewer fields to fill out, the better. We know this from ourselves. We don't really want to give our information. So just really make sure that you are only asking for what's really relevant. And of course, then in the end, don't forget to show your appreciation, thank them for the time, for considering your services, and let them know that you received their data and what's going to happen next. All right, now that we all passed the theory, Jenna, will you show us how to implement this?
Thank you so much, Sarah. Yes, I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to share my screen. So let's get started. Okay, so here we are. We're starting in the Heyflow app, and I'm going to jump right now into the flow we have. So just in the interest of saving time, we are not starting a flow completely from scratch, but we found a good flow to work in and to be able to really customize on a step-by-step basis. So as Sarah was mentioning, really, great to have, a landing page, value propositions, just a little bit more information and insights into what your business is, what your offering is, any sort of information about who you are, what you do, and what users can expect from you is always going to be really, really helpful when building out your flows. So just really want to take a couple of minutes to show you what a landing page would look like. So again, you're having, you're having a bit of information of what's going to happen within the flow. You have your CTAs, which are super important because anytime you click, essentially when the user clicks there, they should be brought into the flow so they can start going through the questions and they can be properly qualified. Adding in elements such as logos are also really helpful. Again, it's just trust. It's, who have you worked with, and why should I, continue with your services, essentially. So really, so many elements that you can be using. It essentially is meant to look like your website. You can add, again, also like, videos, lists. We're going to go over some of the other blocks as well, but for now, just in the interest of time, I just wanted to quickly show you what a landing page looks like, and then we're going to move on actually to our first question. And then just one thing really quickly, you can always build out your landing page from scratch. Alternatively, you can always use one of our templates that we offer, and you can always copy and paste that landing page into your other flows as well. So you can start from scratch, or you can already use pre-existing ones. So now we're going to start with our first question. So currently, I don't have a screen set up for this, so we are going to add a screen. So I just go to the right side of this panel and I click Add Screen. And then the screen is going to populate down here. Now, really important when we start a screen or when we start a flow, really, really helpful to name your screens. This is helpful also for your analytics as well. Just to know, for example, if you're having any drop-offs, you can know from a screen-by-screen basis where further improvements can be made. So we're going to call this screen warm-ups. And as Sarah mentioned, the beginning of the flow should be really easy. So it shouldn't be something that a question that the user has to think too much about. They should already know the answer to the question that they're going to ask. So for example, if you're a recruiting agency, you might ask the question, are you hiring? Yes or no. Or if you're a vet, you might ask, what type of pet you have. So just anything that removes any sort of cognitive burden from the user is always going to be really helpful in getting people to actively go through the flow. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add the question. So the first question I want to ask is, does your business have a website? So I'm going to go ahead and start typing that in here. Perfect. And then because we're coming from somewhere else, we're going to also add a little text that says, let's go. But one thing I want to do is make sure that this is in the right heading. Perfect. Great. So now I'm going to add a text block, and we're going to have a little text that says, let's get started, because they're already coming from somewhere else. So it's just going to make it a little bit nicer to, let's get started. It's a little bit more fun, a little bit more intuitive. And so we're going to get that in there. Perfect. So the first question is, does your business have a website? Perfect. Now we've added in the headline and we've also added in the text. Now we want to go ahead and we want to actually add the picture choice block. So why the picture choice block? As Sarah was mentioning, the picture choice is very engaging. Also, the multiple choice is also very engaging as well. These two blocks usually have a higher conversion rating. So we definitely encourage to start with the picture choice. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to drag and drop that in here. Now, because we're only asking a yes or no question, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove two of the options that we have here. Perfect. So now I'm going to change this from target to yes, and this from launch to no. Perfect. Now the next step that we can do here is we can actually change the images in the picture choice block. So to do that, we just hover over here and we click. And from here, you can select an icon, you can select an emoji, you can upload your image, or you can remove the icon as well. For this case, we're going to select an icon. And within our icons, we have thousands and thousands to choose from. So for this, we're going to choose a validation one. So I want to use this check mark for the yes. And then coming back down here for the no, I'm going to once again type in validate. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose this X over here. So now we have the yes and the no, and we have that nicely set up. Another trick that I want to show you is the navigate on click option. So when this is toggled, essentially the user clicks and they're brought to the next screen. If we toggle this off, then nothing happens. So one of the things that we always suggest is to always add a continue button. So we're going to go ahead here. We're going to add a continue button, and we're going to drag and drop that in. So essentially what happens now is because the navigation is toggled off, the user will have to know that they have to click continue. So it's an extra click, which, you know, we definitely want to reduce those extra clicks. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to toggle on back on navigate on option click. We make this required. So for example, when the user comes and they click continue, they need to know that they need to choose an option. So it creates a little bit more of an intuitive way for users to actively go through the flow. And just for the sake of continuity, we're going to keep this continue button throughout the flow as well. So again, it reduces the clicks, and this is generally one of our best practices to have. Also, with some companies, having that continue button might be really a necessary feature for your flow as well. So now, one of the big topics regarding flows is all about design functionality. And design and corporate identity is really so important in your flows. So this is what I want to kind of touch on right now. So if we jump into the section here that says design, you can access all of the design functionalities within this tab. So from here, we can find our main colors, our fonts, and such. And I imagine that a lot of you are probably working with some sort of brand guidelines. However, if you're not, there's a little trick that we always like to suggest to our customers. This trick is called CSS Peeper, and it's a Chrome extension that you can use. And essentially, you click on the extension, and it's going to pick up the font, it's going to pick up the colors that are used on the page. So as you can see here, the heading is Montserrat. If we click here, we can see the different colors that are being used in the background and in the fill and such. And all you would need to do is copy, and then you can bring that over into your design tab and then set that hex code as such. We've already done that, but just to give you an idea of how that works, it's a really helpful tool. It'll also provide you with more insights around padding and spacing as well. Perfect. So coming back into the design, here you can also select your font family. You can also upload your custom fonts depending on which plan subscription you do have. But within here, you can really set your main colors, your headlines, text, etc. Now, the other thing that I want to touch on is our presets. So with most of our blocks, you have the option to select a preset. So for example, to do that, I would right click on the block. So in this case, it's the picture choice block. I scroll down to design, and here I'll be able to select a picture choice preset that I find looks best for me and for my business. And here you can go ahead and you can select whichever one you prefer. And essentially, what you can do within here is you can set the general design settings, what it looks like when it's idle, so when nothing's happening, when you're hovering over it, and when it's active. So you have a lot of functionality here within that, which is really great in terms of designing. Now, if you're in your flow and you don't have this, make sure to check to see if your design settings are on essentials or expert. You would need the expert setting in order to be able to access these presets. The other thing that I want to mention about the presets is once you've set a preset, so for example, we've set this preset for picture choice. Now, all the picture choice blocks that we use in this flow will be using this specific preset. So it's kind of set that way for this specific flow. If you decide to create another flow, you would set another preset if you wanted to. So just to give you guys some insights into the design and the functionality behind that. And again, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but we have additional design settings here under styles as well. So there you can have some further design capabilities. Perfect. So looking at our first screen, I think it looks great. I think there's some things that we could probably, do a little differently. And one of those is adding a header and a footer. And again, adding a header and a footer is really great. It's best practice advice. It's going to really help, again, with just kind of building trust with your audience, letting people know who you are. It's also kind of, coming around corporate identity and branding and such. So what we're going to do right now is we're in the header. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go and add a logo. So I just drag and drop that in here. And now I have my logo set up. And of course, you can upload your own logo. And this would be the way that you would do it, just by clicking here to upload. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to add an avatar. And an avatar is, again, it's just a really nice way to build up additional trust with your customers. We see a lot of our B2C customers doing this as well. And this is also could be something where we look into A/B testing. So having an avatar in your flow versus not using one, and seeing which flow converts better. So in this example, I'm not going to be using the dog. I'm actually going to upload my own image. So this should be it. Oh, whoops. Here we go. So we're going to open, and there we go. And I'm going to upload this. Perfect. So now I have my avatar here. It's just, again, it's like a personal touch. It's nice to have it there. And I would encourage you to test this out. The other thing you could always add into your header is a progress bar. Now, the progress bar is essentially going to pick up, when it's in the header, it's going to pick up all of the screens within your flow. So if you're not using conditional logic, and that's something we're going to showcase a little bit later on, then I would suggest to put the progress bar in the header. However, if you're using the conditional logic, I would not suggest to use the progress bar in the header. The reason being is, as I mentioned, it's going to essentially count every single screen that you have in your flow. And if you're using conditional logic, then you're guiding users to different screens. So it's not going to be as effective. So for this presentation, I'm going to actually remove the progress bar from the header, and we're going to actually add it on a screen by screen basis. But just wanted to make you guys aware of that feature as well. So we've shown the header, we've shown the progress bar. Now we want to set the footer. So I'm going to click on the footer, and here I'm going to want to add links. Now, I think adding links is a really great practice, and adding the links, you can actually include things like your terms and conditions, for example, or a link to Heyflow. So here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say terms and conditions. Perfect. And then I'm going to have this as a link to Heyflow still. Now, if I wanted to, and here, sorry, you would add your link, and then I would suggest to open it in a new window. One thing you can do as well, further design capabilities, is jumping in. You can change the colors. You can also change the gap. So I maybe want to have a little bit more of a gap. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to change this to 50 pixels. I'm going to apply it to the flow. And then when we go into the footer section, we can see that there's a further gap now between those two. So to me, that looks good. I'm happy with my footer. And again, you can set up your footer with additional information. You can add your logos in there, whatever works best for your use case. But highly recommend you guys to make sure to add those headers and those footers. So let's jump back onto our warm-up page. So perfect. Now that we've finished the header and the footer, we now need to add it to our screen. So I click at the top here, add header, and then at the bottom here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add the footer. Perfect. So let's move on to the qualifying questions. So as Sarah was mentioning, really important to know what kind of questions you're going to be asking your customer. What are some of the most important details that you need and such. So consider beforehand what you want to ask, what certain blocks might be important for you to get that information. So for example, if you're a recruitment agency, maybe having the text area block might be important for you. Or if you want to get, ratings or reviews, maybe using the icon rating. Essentially, have to play around with the different blocks. There's so many different ones to choose from, but what's most important is to know exactly what information you're trying to get from your customers so that you're asking the most relevant questions. I would also keep it to a minimum, so like 3 to 5 questions. Again, the most important ones. Don't make it too overwhelming for the customers, and make sure to only ask one question per screen. So this is definitely a best practice suggestion for you guys. So for example, with this, I've also used the picture choice block. I have made this required, but I've also made this a multiple selection. So I've toggled off the navigate on click option. So the user is gonna have to click as many marketing channels that they're using before they can click continue to get to the next screen. And one thing that I just realized that I did not add in the warm up screen is actually our progress bar. So I'm actually gonna go back in here and I'm gonna add the progress bar to the top, just to give you guys an idea, and wanna set those filled elements. Perfect. Okay, so now this is looking like we want it to look. We have the questions, we have that continue button, and we have the header and the footer already set in there. Perfect. So moving on, we're gonna jump into the next question, which we're asking, how many employees does your company have? So when it comes to getting any sort of numerical value from your customers, again, it's really suggested to use ranges, only because customers might not know exactly a certain amount. It just might be easier for them to provide a range rather than that specific number. And it can also reduce drop-offs on those specific screens. So here's an example of what we've set up, again, using the multiple choice block. It's required, and it's navigate on option click. So really try and keep the numerical values like this. Of course, there might be situations where you do need to, have set figures, but as much as possible to use the range would be my suggestion. Perfect. All right, now we're coming to nearly the end of our flow. And the next thing that we need to do is we need to add the contact details. But before we do that, one of the things that we highly suggest with our customers is to use something called the loader block. And I'm going to show you in a second what the loader block looks like. It's essentially it's more of a psychological tool to make it seem like, something's really kind of happening with that user's information. It's being processed and such. And this is just essentially adds more of that business that, wow, this is like really impressive. They're taking in my data, something's happening with it, which it is, but essentially it's just implying that their input is, just enhancing the credibility and seriousness. And you can also set the different navigation settings for the loader screen, which is pretty cool to have that option. But for this case, we're just using it as a next screen to get to the contact page. So again, just giving some information using our headline, evaluating your data. Here, you can also make sure to change the headings. So again, this was something I was showing you in the design tabs. You can set the different settings for different headings. So for example, if I used H3, it would look like this, but in this case, I want to use H4. Perfect. Okay. So nearly there, we're getting to the contact page. So haven't added anything yet to the contact page. We're going to do that together. So what we recommend always is to use our contact page form. So this is an already made form. You just have to drag and drop that into your screen. And here we're now picking up the first name, the last name, the email address, the phone number, and of course, the consent to agree to terms and conditions. And a newsletter, you can always change this to be whatever you need them to, I guess, click to agree to. So just to give you an idea, this is all really nicely set up. It looks pretty good. One of the topics now that I want to jump into is what should be required and what's not required. So again, this is kind of dependent on your work, your best practices, and what information you need. Now, jumping into the phone number block, we see from data that generally, if you make this phone number required, you might have a higher drop-off rate in terms of people filling in their contact details. So we recommend to actually not make this required if your business case allows for it. Now, as you can see, I have the country code set at Germany. Don't think that's really relevant for many of you. So we're going to untoggle Germany, and instead we're going to change this to the United States. And as you can see, you can select many other country codes. You can also allow all country codes, and you can really set this up as you see fit. The other thing we do have is a phone number network validation provider. It's a module where you would click this in, and essentially it would validate verified phone numbers for you. And again, this can be really helpful to reduce the number of, let's say, unverified numbers that are appearing in your responses. The other thing that I'd like to add, just because again, right now we're asking people to provide their contact details. There's a lot of trust that has to go behind this. So what I would probably do in this case is I might add like a logo bar just at the bottom, just to provide that additional value. And then if I want to make this look a little bit nicer, I might just jump back into using CSS Paper, as I was showing before. And I want to pull this color, for example. Oops. So I'm going to grab this color. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back into my webinar, or into my flow, sorry. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to add in the background color using the hex code. So now we see that that's been set up nicely. And again, further work can probably be done in here. Oh, we should also add a headline that says, thank you, or here, oops, let's add this headline in here. Let's say we just need a bit more information. And again, you can put this in whatever you want. It's totally your prerogative. For this, I'm just, something nice, something easy, and just making it a little bit more personalized. Perfect. Okay, so one other thing that I wanted to mention as well is you could always test to see, if splitting up the contact form works better for you, if it provides more conversions, for example. And this is where using the A/B testing feature can actually really come in handy. So for example, you could test this flow versus, having your contact page with your first name, last name, and then having a second screen for the email address and phone number or company name, etc. So test it around, have a play. I would definitely start with the form just to see how the results are that you're generating. But this is really nice because it's already built out for you and it already looks quite put together. Perfect. Now, the last thing that we want to do is we want to add a thank you, because you know what? They've gone through this whole process and we want to just make it a little bit nice for them. And then here is where we can also add that additional personalization. So how do we do this? It's really easy. I'm going to show you now. So we're going to go back into our contact page. We're going to click on the input field that says first name, scroll down to labels and variables, and here I'm going to add a variable. You can put in whatever variable you want, but for now, I'm going to put in F name. That is my variable. Now I'm going to go back to the thank you page, and I'm going to say thank you at, thank you at, and then here I can pick up my variable. So for example, if I go through this section, okay, I submit, and then you can see what happens in the next screen. It has picked up my name, and we love to see that. Also, really nice to have, essentially the steps so that the user knows exactly, what the next step will be. So in this case, they've already done the inquiry, they've done the contact. So the following step would just be the appointment. So just to create, to give the user a little bit more insights as to, like what's going on, what should they be prepared for. The other thing you can also do in the thank you page is add any links to other websites. You can also link to, call, like so that the user can actually make phone calls or to WhatsApp. And in this case, maybe I want the user to book a meeting with me via Calendly. So we do have a Calendly integration in here. So at the bottom, would be where the user could actually then book a 30-minute meeting with me, or however your Calendly is set up. So there's a few options to do here. And what's cool is you can navigate after scheduling and they can pass values to Calendly. So for example, the user's already inputted their first name, their last name, their email address and such, then they wouldn't have to redo this again in the Calendly block. Perfect. So one of the tips that I'd love to touch on really quickly, and something that's been brought up before, is the conditional logic. So conditional logic is really, really important when you want users essentially to be, qualified properly through the funnel with only seeing the information that is most relevant to them. So for example, let's go to the first question. And the first question is, does your business have a website? So here, let's say if they do have a website, I want them to continue down the funnel. If they don't have a website, I want to qualify them out. So how can I do this? So I'm going to go to navigation. I'm going to click next screen and I'm going to select conditional logic. And here is where I'm going to set up that conditional logic. So when they click on the screen on the option yes, I want them to go to the third screen. All right, to the marketing channels. If they select no, that's fine. I've actually built out another screen, which I've called disqualify. So I've set that up now. So for example, if we click no, they are brought to the thank you for your time. Unfortunately, we are unable to proceed with your request. And I've also included some links to our website, to LinkedIn and such. So again, want to provide that additional value, still get the user to do something with my industry, with my business, but maybe I can't support them at this time, but at least redirect them as well. And then again, if I click on the yes, then I'm directed to the next screen. So we have this nicely set up. And also, feel free to test out some of our other blocks. Like one of the blocks that I also love to use is our list block. The list block is a great way to provide, just additional information on what your offer is and such. So just to show you an example, again, it's just additional value. There's also the checklist, which is great. And also one of my favorite is the accordion. And in the accordion, you can provide additional information to that user. And it's not always going to be shown, which is nice just because it keeps it nice and kind of sleek. But for more information, they just click on the buttons and then, you would set that up as necessary. So just to kind of give you an idea of some of the best practices here. So now that we finished this, we are going to go ahead and we're going to go test the flow. So first things first, I need to go ahead and I need to publish. So once this is published, we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually see what the flow looks like in real time, make sure that everything is looking good and it's set up the way that we want it to be set up. And again, it's try different blocks, try different things, this is just practices that, we've seen be most effective with our customers. So here we go. I'm on the landing page now. I think that looks quite nice. I've added a little video, best practices, of course. So now we're going to select one of the CTAs. So we're going to jump into book a meeting. So first question, does your business have a website? Now we know that if we click no, it's going to go to the disqualify. So for this case, we're just going to click yes. And now we continue. So let's say I want to select these two options. I go ahead and continue. How many employees? And now we're in the loader. Okay, perfect. So here I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to add my details. And again, since I've made this not required, I'm going to leave that blank. And I'm going to go ahead and submit. And perfect. So I've gone through the flow. I'm really happy with it. I've provided, the value there, additional information. They can book a meeting with me. And so now my flow is done. And yeah, here it is, ready to be sent out and shared with customers.